Thing. Hi, this is Steve Stelzer, Program Director of the Green Building Resource Center, and I've got Jonathan Kratz here with U.S. Green Building Council Texas chapter. And so here we go. This is our sort of monthly info session. And so today we're happy to talk about green stormwater infrastructure. This is kind of the second version after a few years. Let's see, I think the first one I did was before COVID, so it's been a while. Got some really good speakers here. Really pleased to introduce them. I've got our first pair is going to be Lagnesh Varshney and Johana Clark. They're both with Public Works. And they are the two that inspired me to put on this program. And they did a presentation for our TTI group. And so Johana is a senior assistant director overseeing the stormwater operations branch with our transportation and drainage group within Houston Public Works. She's originally from Bogota, Colombia, and she obtained her civil engineering degree from the National University of Colombia and her master's degree in civil engineering from UT Arlington. She has 19 and a half years of experience working with the city of Houston. So it's a real pleasure to have her. And then Lagnesh is originally from New Delhi, India, and came to the USA to go to the University of Oklahoma in 1988 for his master's. So he has a BS and MS in civil engineering and is a registered PE in the state of Texas. And he has almost 35 years of experience in various aspects of civil engineering and currently working as managing engineer in the stormwater operations in transportation and drainage, same group as Johana. And so he's with the city of Houston for almost 18 and a half years and worked in private consulting firms for almost 17 years before joining the city of Houston in 2005. So without further ado, and I do ask, please put any questions in the chat, okay? We want to make sure we get through our group of speakers. We've got Andrew and Lam next, and then we will have time for questions and answers. And it's actually very helpful if you put them in the chat as you think of them, so that then we can get to them at the end. So appreciate that, and take it away, Johana and Lagnesh.
Good morning, everyone. We're very, very thankful for the opportunity. I'm very excited to join the webinar. Green infrastructure, that is an amazing topic that has been in many of our minds for a long time. A lot of efforts moving along. So we're excited to be here today to share with you what Public Works is doing. With that, let me start with Houston Public Works purpose. Together, we create a strong foundation for Houston to thrive. We base everything we do, how we perform, on 5 to thrive values: integrity, teamwork, ownership, communication, and respect. Next, please. As Steve mentioned, Lagnesh and I are part of transportation and drainage operations. Next. Well, I guess a slide note, please place your questions in the chat. We are part of a stormwater operations branch. So what our team is tasked with is with delivering drainage rehabilitation programs for the city. We also review all the engineering and design plans that go along through the city for CIP, any type of feedback that our Office of City Engineers require for encroachments or any type of private development impacting drainage infrastructure. We also have a very good GIS and asset management team that is tasked with keeping our drainage assets in line and properly track and map. And we also plan for the future drainage in the city of Houston and coordinate with our capital projects team to make those happen. And our large group is maintenance. We maintain and operate the existing massive drainage infrastructure in the city. So with that, our local drainage program is one of the programs that we have to rehabilitate the infrastructure that we have today in the city. And we deliver, again, rehabilitation, but also very comprehensive street and drainage projects for various neighborhoods throughout the city. And this is where we started looking at green infrastructure. So let's talk about the why. Next slide, please. So many cities are already ahead of Houston for various reasons. They have been investing in green infrastructure. as part of integrated management solutions for stormwater, not only to help with the stormwater quality, but to also help with the stormwater runoff mitigation. The green approach can give us a lot of environmental and social benefits too, that through the traditional gray infrastructure methods we cannot achieve. So overall performance of green infrastructure allow us to reduce pollutants discharge into receiving waterways. We remove a lot of air and water pollutants and also control stormwater runoff, and it helps us flood mitigation strategy. And all of these, why we're looking at it, is perfectly aligned with what Resilient Houston is about. So I hope all of you are familiar with the plan that was released back in 2020 by Mayor Turner, and it's a framework to transform our city to be sure that it's sustainable and resilient. And approaches such as green infrastructure are key and very critical to achieve these goals. Next slide. Again, going back to Resilient Houston, this framework has big main 18 goals that need to be achieved if we want to get to the 2050 carbon neutral objective that was laid out by this plan. And one of them, if you see on your right side, goal 11, complete 100 new green infrastructure projects by 2025. So that's why Houston Public Works has taken the lead on piloting a set of projects as part of our rehabilitation efforts throughout the city. So we will have green infrastructure incorporated in many CIPs moving forward. However, we wanted to go ahead of the game and start implementing them and learning to see what green infrastructure techniques are suitable for the city, which ones that will be built in the cities right away to be maintained mainly by public works or any other department. Which ones are the ones that are, again, are going to be suitable for us to take over, and of course, efficiency. So that's the goal of this presentation. We want to share with you some of those initiatives. Next slide. So as benefits of its green infrastructure, we can list these primary ones. We can manage stormwater runoff. We can provide retention. We can hold on to this stormwater for some time before it gets rapidly released into our waterways or standard drainage methods, as we do when we don't have this type of applications. We reduce street ponding. We can minimize the construction footprint that we typically see in our projects. We can promote groundwater recharge, and contaminant removal is a big thing. Again, stormwater quality is a critical element for these applications. And of course, they're aesthetically pleasing bioswales, permeable pavers, and any other type of applications that are related to this practice are more pleasant for the community and help us achieve air and water quality objectives. Next. We do have challenges. Again, those are the reasons why we started with these piloting projects that we're gonna share with you today. We are seeing obviously higher costs than traditional infrastructure, mainly because we are not seeing yet in Houston a massive deployment of these applications just yet. We hope that that's gonna change next few years. We have seen limited flexibility to make field changes, longer lead time due to limited suppliers. Again, all of these related to the pilot projects that we have been working on last few months, and also limited certified installers within the city. Most of the applications require recurring maintenance, like some of our traditional methods, but the maintenance that we have for green infrastructure is different, is very different to what we have today related to inspection, cleaning of storm sewer pipes, or maintaining roadside ditches, detention pumps, stormwater pump stations. Green infrastructures are very different and require for us to train our maintenance teams. And we don't have necessarily performance and maintenance data, again, collected directly by the city. We know that many entities like Harris County, HGAC, and others have collected a lot of data and have published very good guidelines. But we wanted to be sure that as part of the city of Houston, specifically Public Works, that we are doing our diligence and collecting our own data to see the effectiveness and how suitable those practices are. Next. So with that, I want to pass this on to Lagnesh Varshney, who we'll be sharing with you the specific applications that we chose for our pilot projects and how we conducted and how we are performing and evaluating these applications. So with that, Lagnesh, is yours.
Okay. Thanks, Johana, and I welcome all of you to this presentation, and I'm glad to share what we have accomplished in last 2 years. Thanks to Johana, thanks to Veronica and our upper management who allowed us to use these green infrastructure elements in our project. So on first one is the porous concrete sidewalk, which we installed on a couple of projects, which I will share next in next slides, and porous concrete paver and BioSwale. BioSwale, we are working as we speak. The project just started a couple of weeks ago. So we'll talk more about. So these 3 elements, we are working on our maintenance project. Next slide, please. So this is the porous concrete sidewalk, which has almost 2 feet of filter media under the sidewalk. And then there is a small 6-inch perforated pipe, which collects all the stormwater and ultimately drains to the system. Either it could be open ditch system or it could be closed system. And then another one is the sampling point. And I will tell more about the sampling point, which we are doing on every project so that samples can be collected for the stormwater quality. On the right side, the way it's the Malone Park sidewalk, you can see how we were working on the preparation and all those loose gravel, filter media, and then finally we put the panel on top of it. Next slide, please. Okay, these are the porous paver, which we did on Winter Street project. Why did we choose porous paver in this location? Because this is the less traffic area. It has only one driveway access to the property next to railroad. And we did this project last year, started, finished in May, and I'm going to show you some of the performance in our next slide. Again, it's the same thing. It's blocks, interblocks. Then there's a filter media at the bottom, 2 feet, and then there's a 8-inch perforated pipe in the middle, which can collect all the water and ultimately drains to the closed system or the open system or the ditch system. Next slide, please. BioSwale, this is our 3rd item, which we will be using on Windsor Park project, where we are doing connection between Windsor Park and Mayor Sylvester Turner Park in Acres Home, where we will use some of the porous sidewalk and BioSwale. This is the 3rd item, which we haven't started yet, but we have released for construction. And I can share more detail once we finish that project for BioSwale. Next slide, please. So cost comparison, as Johana mentioned, it's quite pricey. When we started, we end up paying more because, first of all, limited supplier, limited delivery, not many competition, small quantities, and we end up paying little more to begin with for the sidewalk. Then we had a second project, Winter Street project. When we had a sidewalk and a porous pavers, we negotiated. We negotiated almost 30 to 40% down. And then our 3rd project, which is Windsor Street, where we have almost $1 million concrete porous sidewalk, where we negotiated more. So we are negotiating as we deliver more projects, as our demands increases, we are going to get good negotiated costs from these suppliers. And when they find out that city is looking for those options, then more suppliers will come in, more installer will come in, and we will have better competition. As Johana mentioned in her presentation, that by 2025, city is kind of committed to deliver 100 projects, green infrastructure projects. And these are the first 3 from Houston Public Works. I know there are some other entities who are also involved. So when they see there's a lot of demand, we will have better competition, we will have better price comparison. And the benefits from these green infrastructure element, we will be quantifying in future, maybe after 2 years, and then put some cost benefit. We can do some cost benefit analysis. What kind of benefits are we getting after we investing so much money in completing those projects? Next slide, please. As I mentioned that we have Malone Park and Winter Street completed. Malone Park, we have a sidewalk, porous sidewalk all around the park. Winter Street, we have a sidewalk and porous pavers on Winter Street. If you look into the volume, which volume of detention, in terms of in Malone Park, we have almost 100,000 gallons of water, which is, somebody suggested, hey, let's do it with a coffee cup of Starbucks. 816,000 coffee cups, 1 million 12-ounce Coke can. Same with Winter Street. Look at the volume we will have after any rain event. I would rather have water in those voids rather than going to the property or kind of creating some gutter ponding or some kind of a flooding, not flooding, but some kind of a drainage issue. So these green infrastructure, they are providing temporary storage of stormwater. It can prevent flash flooding if there's a continuous rain event. And of course, it minimizes the gutter ponding. And the way I look at it, if you look into this volume, we are kind of not needing any detention pond. And we all know the cost of detention pond, maintenance, get the land, get all those features attached to it. It's a quite pricey. And that's what we will be doing, cost benefit analysis after a couple of years once we have more data and more information regarding its performance. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, these are the projects with green infrastructure. Next slide, please. Malone Park. This is the location right near University of Houston, almost $1.5 million. All these red lines, it talks, we have sidewalk on both sides, and we did improve streets because this was covered under street and drainage rehab. The project was done. We have this green infrastructure sign, especially made for us, and we did come up with new signs from our maintenance facility, which we will have at these locations, talk about green infrastructure. So this project is complete. If you have time, go by, check it out. Next slide, please. These are some construction photos. I just want to share how it was, how it is. Next slide, please. These are the before, how it was, how it is now. And you can see the sidewalk on both sides, brand new sidewalk. Next slide, please. This is Winter Street, where we had a Winter Street and Hickory. Winter, we put porous paver. Hickory, we put porous sidewalk on both sides, and our sidewalk going through the driveways because these are traffic rated. The people can drive and park their car in their garages. So that project is also complete in May. And next slide, I'm going to show you how this porous pavers are working. Next slide, please. These are some of the during construction photos, how we were doing, and you can see the 8-inch perforated pipe on your left, top left, the person is working on. And these are some of the panels, very heavy panel. And it's very difficult to make those field changes on those panels. So we have to be exact in measuring those. Next slide, please. These are some before and after. Look how good, which we mentioned, aesthetically pleasing. The porous paver after looks very nice, very close to downtown. Please go by, check it out. Next slide, please. Okay, would you please click the left and see how the water goes? You need to start from 0. Back it up, yes. Now you guys can see We are pouring water during construction, and water is gone. It's going all to the storage, to the 2 feet filter media. And the next video is showing how to clean it. Would you please? Yeah. This is the way we clean it. It's a pressure wash, and the black hose is kind of sucking through the pores. We need that every 3 months, and we need deep cleaning once a year. So maintenance is kind of a challenge, but nothing is impossible in Houston Public Works. We'll make it happen. We are gearing up. We are gearing up with equipment. We are gearing up with our manpower. We are providing training. Our street and drainage, Mr. Fabio Capio, is under his team, and we are working with them, and we'll come up with some game plan to do the continuous maintenance. Next slide, please. Windsor Park. This project is under construction. You can very well see Dolly Ride and I cannot see another street down on south. We are putting concrete porous sidewalk on both sides. It's traffic rated, going through driveways also, and BioSwale on the ditches. The project is in construction. Next year, May 2024, it will be done. Almost $2.2 million. Out of 2.2, $1 million we are spending on porous sidewalk. Negotiated price. It would have been 1.5 million. But we negotiated pretty good because we are using more. Next slide, please. So here's the good news. USGS approached us. Hey, what can we do to help you in sampling? I said, hey, it's free. Let's come on in. So we come up with a right-of-way agreement for those locations, and we install sampling point on those projects. So they will be starting those stormwater quality sample to check the quality, and they will share those data with us after they do that. We just executed the agreement in July. So for next 18 months, they will be checking our Winter Street project and eventually Windsor Park project. So those 2 locations will be sampled by them on a periodic basis, especially before the rain event, after the rain event, to check the quality before it goes through the system. And there will be a lot of parameters which we will find out, and we would be happy to share with this group again in future. Next slide, please. I think that. Okay, that's all for me. And now I'm passing on to Tran Lam. It's all yours.
Hey,
All right,
thanks,
Lam. Just wanted to let everyone know, Lam. So please, give a quick introduction because I didn't get your stuff. You're here in my building at the Houston Permitting Center, and Lam is with the Office of the City Engineer. Okay, and which of course he's an engineer, not like completely like the other 2 that just spoke, but Johana and Lagnesh are in our Public Works building at 611 Walker. So just trying to, give everybody a little tiny bit of background of the vastness of Public Works and where people are and all that kind of good stuff. And then Andrew, who's going to follow, is with the mayor's office, so he's at City Hall. So hey, we got, here's the benefit of going virtual, everyone. So anyway, take it over, Lam.
Hey, thanks, Steve. So my name is Lam. I'm over at the Houston Permitting Center, and I oversee on a daily basis as stormwater plan review for any development in the right-of-way. So let's, next slide. So again, if, along this presentation, you guys put any of the question you have, any curiosity, put it in, and then we'll answer it later. So I'll be presenting the LID, which is a low impact development. It's a green stormwater infrastructure. So LID is an engineered small scale hydrologic control to mimic pre-development or green space. The LID techniques are both flood mitigation tool and stormwater quality control. So on this part, I'm representing the Office of City Engineer to provide a brief introduction to the LID program. That's part of the GSI initiative that was promulgated under the mayor. Next. So under this office, we issue construction permits in the right-of-way through plan review and field inspection. The OCE maintains the infrastructure design manual and construction specification. These documents are updated periodically. In fact, we're in the process to revise the Chapter 9 stormwater. So today's topic will cover the stormwater challenges we face as a city and briefly provide the stormwater management tools, particularly LID, that's available to designers and developers. Next. So why is it important, for stormwater management in Houston, particularly, we all experienced the Hurricane Harvey in 2017, and so we have to develop. So after Harvey, the city had to develop additional stormwater management tool to have a holistic stormwater management approach, right? So the goal is to encourage designers and developers to utilize every stormwater management tools that are available, but particularly these LID techniques that I'm going to go into detail next. So before I get into some of the tools that it's available for designer, I want to talk about background, the city and compared to the other cities. So some factor about Houston. So we receive a large amount of rain, so about on average total about 50 inches, and our topography is around 50 to 100 feet. It may be a little higher on the outcrops of Houston, but the geology is clay, primarily clay and silt, which is the Beaumont clay that's around here. Comparing that with Austin and Dallas, the rainfall is less, the topography is very in elevations. We're talking about hundreds of feet. The geology is very, very different. For example, Austin has, I would say it's more porous, limestone, clay, karst, which is, caverns, and Dallas is kind of a mixture of Austin and Houston. But both Austin and Dallas, their condition is much different than us. Basically, we're so flat, and the clay, which is beneath of us, it doesn't drain well. So basically, we got rainfall. We don't have, it's so flat. It's very clayey, and so we have these challenges. These are very, very difficult challenges in this geography. So what are the available tools to overcome these challenges? Next slide. So, so I split into the two set of tools, right? Everybody, when you guys go out drive, you see the conventional stormwater infrastructure. You have surface drainage system, detention pond, underground detention pond, underground storm sewer, open channel, regional detention pond, lakes, etc. Right? But the tools that we want to focus on is the storm infrastructure, and which is LID techniques. And there's other types. There's rain water harvesting, urban forest, constructed wetlands, soil amendment. So I want to dive in a little bit more with pictures and to kind of go through these tools. So next slide. So here, this represents the city, and you guys typically seen for the conventional tools we have, again, the storm drain. You would have surface runoff going to storm drain, and then it carries to the underground storm sewer. Sometimes it goes to the wet pond or dry pond before you get discharged into the lakes and rivers. Next slide. Now, LID is LID is basically is to mimic a pre-development, right, or a green space. So these can be integrated seamlessly into the private development. So we have, like, on top of the roof, we call it a green roof. And these can be a way to control the runoff. You have permeable pavement that Lagnesh team has been emphasized on. And then we have the rain garden or bio retention or the wetland. Next. So we can dive a little deeper into the LID. So I would say bioretention is the most representative or the ideal LID features, right? Because the bioretention is a combination of the porous pavement that Lagnesh mentioned about, right? Which is to have stormwater detention, to control the flow, and then to control the stormwater quality. And then on top of that, you have the landscape amenities. So, for the landscape amenities, in terms of environmental, we all hear about carbon capture or carbon neutral these days. So for these landscape, these vegetation, it's a way to capture the CO2. Okay, next. So this is an example of what the city has permitted. So the city permitted 80 projects, which includes bioretention or rain garden, porous pavement, engineered soil media, which is commonly called as tree box or BioSwale. So this on the left you see here is field is it's a sports field. On top there, the green is the astroturf, and this astroturf under it is it's a porous pavement, right? There's a filtering bed under it, so which is categorized as porous pavement. Okay, so on to the next part. I think a lot of you guys in the private development probably curious, right? Because LID, we're encouraging you guys to do LID, but what is the incentive for private development to get on board with this initiative? So like I said very beginning, that we're revising the Chapter 9 stormwater, and the two main incentives that we're looking into is to provide a expedite plan review, right? Potentially that will be in both right-of-way and the building code side for the permitting process, but also the detention reduction, right? So everybody in the private know that April of 2021, that's when the detention rate changed. So right now it's pending for that development, and we'd like to welcome all the developers out there that if you want to make a comment on the Chapter 9, whether it's detention related stuff or detention reduction, you go ahead and submit that to us. And that's all I got.
Okay, thanks so much, Lam. Next up is Andrew, and Andrew is originally from Rockford, Illinois, and he's got his BS in Recreation, Park, and Tourism Administration from Western Illinois University, and a master's in Urban and Regional Planning from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and an MPA from the La Follette School of Public Affairs in the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And they got a good architecture program there too, tell you what. Anyway, he's been with the city since April of last year, and so he's been working with this tax abatement program, and go ahead, take it away, Andrew, and let us know all about that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. So I'm in the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. So as you've heard so far is, we've got some green stormwater infrastructure projects. We understand why it's good for the city and for the areas around here, but cost can be a barrier. And so this tax abatement program is designed to help reduce some of that barrier. So next slide, please. So the chat's been pretty active so far, so keep it up. If you have any questions for me or for anyone else who's talked so far, keep throwing them in the chat. Next slide. So the GSI tax abatement has been in alignment with the Resilient Houston plan as far as the timeline goes. It was first introduced as a concept during the City of Houston Incentives for Green Development report that was released in August 2019. But then in December 2020, we established what that looks like, and that's when it was created by ordinance. Next slide. So there are several eligibility requirements for a company or for a developer to qualify for this abatement. And so I'm going to talk about authorized facilities in a moment, but the total project cost for the entire thing has to be at least $3 million. So that's including development and non-development costs. So fairly small threshold there. The GSI investment in all forms, if you can make a case that it's part of the GSI investment, we'll consider it. So it has to be at least $100,000. The one challenge we see a little bit is that the project construction has not started yet. And that is something that we could negotiate on what construction has not started yet means. But really, the key point that I think you all might be interested in here is the very bottom bullet. And so, the GSI design needs to meet Chapter 9, which Lam just said is being updated. And then also in Chapter 33 of our Code of Ordinances is some planning and development stuff. There's descriptions on what urban forestry and native ecosystem restoration looks like. And I'll go into that stuff in a second too. Next slide, please. So when we're looking at an authorized facility, this comes from another piece of our tax abatement ordinances. And it's really any property facility that can be used for some sort of commercial purpose. And then we have a ton of different examples here. So anywhere from manufacturing to multifamily residential, your retail strip centers, things like that. Next slide. So then now when we're looking at, these are the different eligible GSI methods. And so here, this is where the tax abatement is a little misleading by its name, because it can qualify for anything remotely related to GSI, not just like bioswales or something. So if you have a building and you want to put on a community garden for a multifamily development, that can be something that could qualify for this abatement. If you're putting in street trees along a road design and you want to do something that's a little bit more impactful than your traditional just streetscape, that could potentially qualify, those sort of examples. Next slide, please. So here we're going into a little bit more of the details and requirements of the tax abatement program. So once the project is eligible, we're also considering these factors. So, how much is it going to reduce flooding and reduce the heat island effect, improving water quality? We're also looking at the how the project really aligns with what permitting center has to approve. And then, we really want these projects to be showcases in our community. So we do require that whatever GSI project that would receive an abatement has to be kind of open for either public works or the company to show off and provide either like trainings or some sort of way for us to showcase it. And then when we're looking at the other side of the money side of things, by state statute, no tax abatement can be longer than 10 years. But what's unique about this abatement is that we can abate 100% of the increase in property value for this property, and that amount would be transferring back into whatever your GSI project costs are. And I'll go through some examples in a second here, because it can be a little funky. And what's also unique about this GSI tax abatement is that it can stack with our other traditional economic development tax abatement. So that means a developer can come in, and if they're doing a lot of other infrastructure, so let's say it's a manufacturing facility and they're putting like a green roof on the building, something like that, they could get a traditional tax abatement for their actual machinery and equipment and some of that other stuff, but then also the GSI tax abatement for their green roof, and if they want to put in a bioswale, that sort of stuff. Next slide, please. So here's our first example. If we're taking just the most fundamental basic pieces of the requirements based on the statute. So, project cost is $3 million, $100,000 of GSI costs. The project will qualify for 100% abatement of the city's portion of property taxes. When we plop that into a tax abatement, we're looking at, a potential reimbursement of about $16,000 year over year, and that's assuming that there's no growth in property value. And so, for this example anyway, their $100,000 in GSI costs would be definitely reimbursed within the 10 years. Next slide. So looking at a little bit more real world example, we've got a building that already has a taxable value, about $3 million. They're putting in a bunch of investment. The total project is going to be about $15 million. And of that $15 million, we're looking at about $1 million of GSI project costs. When we plop that into an abatement, that could look at potentially $64,000 from that first year of abatement, and that could go up. We're in this example, we're assuming no growth in property value, but we all know that property value usually increases over time. So in this example, the developer may not be fully reimbursed for the full $1 million, but if we're assuming increase in property value, they very well could be fully reimbursed. All right, next slide. So all tax abatements have to go through this process, regardless of what type of tax abatement it is. So it starts off really with having a conversation with me, and we'll walk through what you need to do. We'll go through the application together. Once that application is formally submitted, our office reviews it, and then we'll determine whether or not we're going to recommend that the tax abatement for city council review. And so during that process, we'll have a public hearing and that sort of stuff. And then once city council approves the abatement, you'll then go into monitoring every year. Well, there's an annual report that you'd have to provide for us. So that's the overview of the general process. There are some things that are specific for the GSI abatement. So next slide. So here, the Green Stormwater Infrastructure tax abatement does have its own separate application compared to our other traditional tax abatement forms. And so what we're requiring with this abatement is we'll need to see really what your designs are. The tax abatement also covers 2 years of maintenance. You can include 2 years of maintenance in your costs, your GSI project costs. So the we're also looking at you to kind of be hand in hand a little bit with the permitting center here. But what we're trying to do is really see, what is that cost gap between if you're putting in your traditional gray infrastructure versus what you do for your GSI infrastructure. And then, well, we all understand the benefits of GSI, but what does that look like for this specific project? And then since all of this is based on the Resilient Houston plan, how this project benefits the city through Resilient Houston. Next slide. So then this one, similarly, this is what our office is going to look at when we're evaluating an abatement. And so, all of these could apply to varying degrees depending on the nature of the project, right? So the big things here is, where is the project? And then otherwise, the next big pieces are, what type of GSI are you doing and to what scale? So then that a really fast, really high overview of our GSI abatement. I understand that, abatements are very case by case, because it really depends on, the site you're working at and the design you're going to do, those sort of things. So what I highly encourage is that you can reach out to me directly and we can set up a meeting to talk about potential projects and what might fit and whatnot. Next slide, please. There's a similar abatement. Oh, I lost the title. I missed that. So this is for a different abatement. This is for our LEED tax abatement. So we have one that if you are pursuing a LEED certification on a building, we have an abatement that can help offset those costs. So here, gold would be 5% an abatement, silver is 10%, platinum is 15% of an abatement. So this is also one that can stack with our traditional economic development abatement. So you could have, if you're going all out with low impact development, you could have, say, an office building that is, LEED certified plus utilizes GSI, and you can have the other, whether it's machinery and equipment or whether it's business personal property, those sort of things can also qualify for the traditional tax abatement. So you could have all three stacked together at the same time. So that is a very fast version of what I'm offering here at the mayor's office. So the next slide has my contact information, and you're welcome to email me or give me a call if you have any questions. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all for the presentations. As was mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of questions pop up in the chat, and some of them that more direct. I saw Lagnesh has been going in to answer some of the specific technical ones. There was one that just came in. I'm going to stick with Andrew. So what is the uptake on the GSI tax abatement program? How many projects have applied or been approved so far?
So that's a tough question, only because we've had 0 applications so far. I hate to say it, but we would love a project to be a guinea pig for us to smooth this process out. But I know that's pretty daunting from a public sector side of, you don't necessarily want to be our test case, and I get that. But if you're willing to work with us through it, I think it'd be very beneficial both for you all, and then also it would help us really streamline what we need to do as far as coordination with the permitting center, with what your project plans are and everything. So 0 for GSI abatement. We do have 2 projects that have gone through the LEED certification abatement.
Fantastic. So how would the loss of tax revenue compare to savings in stormwater management costs?
That's an excellent question. I don't know, really, because I think, they're going to be coming out of different departments a bit. So, the savings in stormwater management is going to go a long way as far as, I think maybe Public Works could answer to that probably a lot better than I could. But for our loss of tax revenue, one benefit to us using our tax abatements is that with the city imposed revenue cap that we have, the tax abatement helps relieve some of that pressure, because if we have to keep lowering our tax rate because of the revenue cap, an abatement then doesn't really have an impact.
Going back to see that some of these were actually answered later in the presentations after they were put in. Lam, could you talk a little bit about BioSwale plant maintenance and how that is projected into a project from the outset?
Yeah. So these BioSwale, and we don't have to specifically talk about BioSwale, but the concept is a you can look at it as a gravel bed or some sort of flow cell or a filter bed. So if water comes through there has to be ports where you monitor for the flow. from either upstream and downstream, and you can figure out the difference and be able to see, if things are plugged up or not. So let's say, that's for a generic a porous pavement type, right? So let's say if you put organic matters, right, engineered soil, porous soil on top of the porous pavement, so to speak. So the soil has to be very porous, right? So if water goes through there, then you can monitor through those ports, just like any other porous pavement.
Okay. I know that there's also a comment too about letting existing green spaces get, quote, shaggy, or letting them grow taller also encourages deeper root growth, which encourages more percolation and less runoff as well. So thank you for adding that, Jim. There was a question too, when you were listing the standard drainage methods versus low impact development. There's a question like, why are rivers considered conventional stormwater infrastructure?
River is part of the hydrologic cycle, and that's the receiving stream. So that's just just expanding the surface water runoff that comes from private development into the different receiving streams.
Okay. I know that Andrew, you talked a little bit about the tax abatement side. Are there any grant programs or other financial assistance available for nonprofits that would consider doing a permeable pavement for a parking lot type of situation?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So yeah, with our office, we're looking at property that's taxable, right? So with a nonprofit not being taxable, the tax abatement options cut off, but it might be worth maybe looking at the Houston Galveston Area Council, or whatever your regional planning commission makeup looks like, because they might have some sort of resiliency grants or other funding mechanism that the nonprofit could utilize. That's my suggestion.
There's a question going back to, I'll jump back to the very beginning to some of these that came in early on. In regard to the challenges that you're facing, are you looking at policy or regulation that needs to be changed to increase the implementation of GSI? And how does this affect hazard mitigation plans and moving that from, are there any developments taking place that involve transdisciplinary research to increase the knowledge of how these systems are actually functioning from a, I guess, hydrological, but also financial and governmental view?
I can answer that partly. I guess the first part, LID, the first question of LID when it's being proposed in private development is the cost benefits, right? Because when using LID to detain water, you don't get a maximum detention volume versus an open detention pond. So we understand that from the technical side, it makes sense that there's a technical benefit to use as LID. So based off of that, we're developing a policy to, if a certain amount of LID is being used, a certain incentive or reduction of detention rate would be potentially be reduced, because a lot of people have complained to us that detention costs a lot of money as part of their private development.
Okay, so what are there any programs that have been put in place to increase the knowledge within government officials, both within public works and outside of public works, along with kind of some of the underserved communities, to increase knowledge of the LID options and other GSI options.
Is that a question for the Office of City Engineer or is that for Andrew?
Well, for all three offices.
Okay. For the Office of City Engineer, I mean, we often, I oversee the storm part of the stormwater is there's a stormwater quality section. And so we would educate them on the utility of LID. Like we would participate in these webinars. And then there's another one with another group over the mayor's office where I believe they're potentially do some marketing in the near future to kind of get people understand more of what GSI is. So there's work in the pipelines for this.
Yeah, I'll add to
Andrew,
that.
I don't know. You might
Sure.
might know more. Yeah.
So promoting GSI in general is kind of outside of the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, but I will say that we do have the Office of Resilience and Sustainability. And so their role really kind of is all things GSI and LEED and those sort of things that really, to me, I see them as both the information center probably for a lot of this, where Lam and I we administer the pieces that are relevant to our departments, but I think something more general would probably be more in the Office of Resilience and Sustainability.
Yeah, and adding up to that, within public works, mainly from the operations and maintenance perspective, we are trying to, within our educational material about traditional drainage systems, especially when we talk about open drainage systems, off-road and roadside ditches, for example, ponds, we are incorporating verbiage about encouraging the community to promote green spaces that is directly related to GSI applications. Also with our consultants, and we're ready to start working on incorporating within the CIP planning processes, the Envision framework that is going to be directly have GSI included on those parameters. But yeah, hopefully as the city becomes more knowledgeable in their own experience with applying GSI, then those educational components will come by default right after.
Okay. So for the city of Houston and other local municipalities, are the bayous the terminus for all stormwater drainage? And if not, where else does it go?
Yes, most of them, unless you have any type of detention facilities, like detention basins, those type of things, or again, underground water detention systems. But typically we are discharging, outfolding into bayous and flood control channels.
Okay. So one kind of follow-on question to that was also that many streets accumulate other trash and debris that gets washed into the storm drains. What means of keeping this trash out of the bayous are being looked at to address that problem?
Wow, I mean, our campaigns, yeah, there is no treatment in between the streets or the open drainage systems from there to going into the waterways. So that's why we have programs like Adopt a Drain, where we encourage the community to help maintain inlets clean throughout the city. We are promoting on educating the community about keeping off-road channels and roadside ditches clean. From flood control perspective, I know they have a lot of cleaning efforts on their bayous, and there are many organizations, including nonprofits, that are continuously on the bayous doing cleanup processes.
So for the pervious pavement and the panels that are put down, is there a potential to have those manufactured locally? One, to reduce transportation cost, but also to use local materials, and also for the economic development side, local economic growth too.
Yeah, that's more for the manufacturers to decide. We would love to have local materials, of course. Right now, we're not seeing that many of those, but hopefully as we have more applications, we start seeing that that type of development.
So I know you've talked a couple times about updating chapter 9 of the city code. What pieces of that are I know we talked in a number of pieces that apply to low impact development and green stormwater infrastructure. Are there, where can people get more information about what is included in that and what is being updated and reviewed right now?
So right now, the current 2022 infrastructure design manual has all the common LID. It has all the specs in there. Now, the quick answer is that, well, if you can contact our office on how you would implement it or how you get permitted, you can contact me. But as far as, like some of the things that I said that's pending for some of the incentives, we're still working on that. And so there's a process right now for IDM revision. And so everybody is able to put in the comments on basically what they want, right? Especially a developer. The city a lot of times don't know the ins and outs of what the developer is wanting. So this is good opportunity for private developers, designers to make those comments about the current rules of process. And then, go through, we review it, and there's comment periods. And then, get that new set of rules will be promulgated.
Okay.
But if they go to the Houston permitting website, there's contact information there where that feedback can be provided. And we just started last July. That's when the fiscal year starts for the city of Houston with Chapter 9 review, which already again has, like Lam was saying, we already have guidelines for LID. Those are going to be revised along with the entire chapter throughout the entire year from here until the end of June.
Okay. If a project has gone through DCR process with the city, can GSI still be implemented with Public Works?
We would like to see that type of feedback or inclusion when the DCR is being done, because that's the very key pre-design planning level type of documentation. Obviously, there is room for discussion if that needs to be added. Just contact your project manager or your engineer, direct contact with the city, and we'll be happy to look into it. But we would love to start seeing all of those incorporated at the DCR level, at the DCR stage.
Are there any programs, grants, or incentives or abatements for single-family residential at this time?
That's a great question. And for our office, the only program that we have that a single family residence could apply for is our historic site tax exemption, where you're improving the older house or residence, and you can get reimbursed for those costs. But as far as GSI for single family residence, that's not something that our office tackles, but there might be some federal or state resources for something along those lines, but I wouldn't know those offhand.
Okay, follow-up question for Public Works. Are the projects specifically selected for GSI, or can a current project in design consider GSI and talk with the city for consideration, specifically a management district project?
Yeah, again, we already have guidelines on the IDM, so any project can propose. We will want to look at the details and their benefits or their maintenance plan. So all of those strategies will be looked at during the plan review process.
Okay, Jonathan, I think we're going to have to, I'm thinking we're going to have to pull the plug on this, even though we got some really great interaction going.
I was thinking the same thing, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. They were all very insightful additions to the conversation. So look forward to seeing everybody on future webinars. with the city of Houston as well as USGBC Texas. We have another series that we do statewide as well. So if you have any questions about that, reach out to either Steve or